Hey everybody, and welcome back to Celestial Tales. This is actually the second part of a maybe two-part, maybe three-part. This is the second part of a multiple-part story because last time things took a little bit longer than expected. So we are continuing the quest of Andrew on his noble mission to recover the wheat before David can turn it into bread and gain the power of the gods. Where were we? And he still has 2 sergeants to defeat. Let's see what happens with that. A little bit awkward picking back up right in the middle of things. Let us just kick things off by drawing a card and going from there, seeing what happens. And for our first card, we have the Hurricane. Andrew, having defeated the child, set off from the town on the next day. Having rested at the inn, Andrew set forth, continuing his quest. He left the town after buying some miscellaneous supplies for the road, and then continued off to the fortress of Shark, the lair of the evil King Lord David. But like any quest to save the world, it would always be fraught with danger. Not long after leaving the town of whatever the town was called, it was never given a name, the town of the Dragon. I wish I hadn't wasted that card on a stupid town name that's never going to be referenced again. What a waste of such a good card. Whatever. Anyway, he left the town of the Dragon and ventured forth, and I lost my train of thought. Alas, no hero's quest to save the world is not fraught with constant, frequent, incessant peril. For only an hour after he had left the village, storm clouds started rolling in. The wind picked up. It began to rain. The sky went from a brilliant blue to a dreary gray. At first, he thought, whatever, it's just some shitty weather, no big deal. But soon, the winds started picking up even more fiercely, more devastatingly. He saw tornadoes in the distance beginning to form as the winds from them blasted him with rain that soon became hail, despite it being a season that would not normally have hail. This is when he knew that something was amiss. This couldn't be right. There was no way this could be natural weather. Sure, he had never really left the Forest of the Scorpion before, but from the stories he had heard from travelers, and even just common sense when it came to meteorology, he knew that this couldn't be right. No way such drastic weather conditions could be normal so close to his home when these kinds of weather conditions were never the case this time of year back in the forest. Unless the Scorpion God protected his home from these kinds of catastrophes, but that was not on his mind. He was not thinking about that because I decided for him to not be thinking about that. Andrew once more consulted his fox familiar, who told him that he sensed something peculiar about this weather. It didn't seem quite evil. Rather, it felt more like magic that had gone haywire, as if some great and powerful wizard had unleashed a spell, perhaps to cast a breeze upon the land to help spread seeds and pollen to bring about a prosperous spring. But the magic had gone berserk. He had put too many ingredients into his potion, or charged too much power into his staff, and created a hurricane that just... This seems like it wasn't Andrew's business, but he was a hero. He had to do something. So he kept walking, thinking that maybe by some crazy coincidence, he will happen upon a solution to this problem. And sure enough, he did, because plot. He came upon a hut, beaming with energy, this strange aura just erupting from the hut. He rushed forth, assuming this must be the cause of the hurricane, whether good or bad, intentional or otherwise, he did not know. But he rushed forth, barged down the door, and within the cabin, he saw the wall. He burst through the door, and within the cabin, he saw another door, which he kicked down after being like, really, another door? Put the door inside the door.
Behind this mask is another mask. Pretty cool, huh?
He kicks the door down, and beyond the second door, he sees an angel, the most captivating woman, captivating temptress he had ever seen. An angel, if you will. But although her body was captivating, there was something amiss. She was all like, while magic was spewing forth into the atmosphere. It indeed seemed that the familiar was right. This magic had gone completely out of control. Adam did not know the purpose of this spell, but he knew he had to stop it. But what could he do? Maybe my magic can neutralize this magic. He conjured forth a toxic cloud and put it around the woman to absorb the magic shooting from her, and it worked for some reason. The magic energy became encapsulated inside an essential bubble of poison, and then with the magic contained, Andrew
I'm gonna use all the power of my brain.
Andrew lunged forth and punched the woman in the face to snap her out of it, and she was all like, including the hiccup. Andrew was curious why punching her caused her to hiccup, but that interrupted her magic. She was like, and then her magic dissipated, and then Andrew drew back his poison and was like, are you okay, ma'am? And she was like, what? And then Andrew was like, I think she's drunk. Hiccups are invading their way into the tale. But like I said before, we're not changing anything. So instead of omitting them, she now sounds drunk. At least when she awoke, maybe she would become more articulate as time went on. The woman, exhausted from her raw exertion of magic, passed out. Andrew put her to bed and then watched over her over the night. The next morning, they talked for a while. The woman was a great sorceress who foresaw Andrew's coming and she had foreseen Andrew's coming. A great and powerful mountain had told her she had seen it in the mountain, for she was an elemental mage and she could read the alpenglow on the horizon, and it told her that a great hero would come if she did something. That a great hero would come. And so she had been waiting for him. This had nothing to do with the hurricane, however. That was just an experiment gone wrong. Anyway, she told Andrew of a ghost that told her of him. And the ghost told her to tell him that he must come to the cemetery where David had originally been buried. This ghost knew David in the afterlife and would be able to provide very important information on how to defeat the vile fiend. So Andrew set forth to the cemetery to the north. Along the way, he encountered an arrow shot into his arm. He was like, ah! And he collapsed.
That escalated quickly.
Andrew awoke a few hours later in a cell. He looked around. The cell was dank, dripping drops of dripping water from the ceiling. A moist, moldy bed and bars. He looked around, wondering what had happened. His wound had been patched, healed by magic, and there was a guard, obviously. He looked to the guard and asked, "Where am I? What happened?" The guard turned to him. "You have been captured by the second sergeant of David. The candlemancer, Phil." "The fuck is a candlemancer?" Andrew asked, using language most unbefitting of a hero, but he was kind of frustrated and weary at the moment. "You have not heard of the candlemancer?" the guard asked. "He is a great and powerful wizard, because apparently everything in this world with any sort of status is a wizard. He uses candle magic to command candles. Even I am a candle, turned to man, made of wax, fueled by the fire within me." "I see." Andrew was at a loss. If this man spoke the truth, his poison magic would be useless. Otherwise, he would cast a plume onto the man, killing the guard and then having his familiar retrieve the key, assuming his familiar can interact with physical objects. Andrew should probably know this, but I do not. Maybe it will be able to at some point in time. I have not decided yet. It will depend on whether or not plot armor requires it. And so, Andrew was stuck in the cell, and nightfall came. Andrew was hungry and tired. He needed to find a way out of this place, and soon. What did the candlemancer even want with him? Perhaps he wished to use him as a mold for more Candlemen. Perhaps something else. Something more sinister, more nefarious. Whatever it was, this man worked for David, the evil King Lord. So Andrew had to escape. But how? That's when he had an idea. A vision, if you will. Something came to him. Something inspiring. The very essence of the eagle poured into him. And that is when he knew he had to use something of that sort to free himself. Just then, as he was wondering how to escape, a much better use for an eagle an eagle perched upon his window. It was a very high window, you see. The ceiling of his cell was very tall. Because of that, the window had no bars. There's no way somebody could climb up. And even if they could, it was too narrow for a human to squeeze through. Or at least a grown man. So there was no bars. So an eagle came and perched on the windowsill. And that is when Andrew got a much better idea. He summoned his fox familiar and was become tiny, like a rat or something, and lure the eagle in here. The fox familiar obeyed the command despite personal risks. He turned into a tiny critter. The eagle saw him as food and attacked, swooping down and swiping at the fox familiar. The fox familiar escaped the cell. The eagle dashed forth, squeezing between the bars just narrowly. I was like, "Ka! Ka! Ka! I don't think eagles ka, but ka!" And the fox familiar climbed up on the soldier, running around, and he's like, "Ugh!" And then the eagle attacked him, and it was like clawing and pecking. And then the soldier fell, collapsed to the ground, and then the eagle, deciding this wasn't worth it, fled the scene back out from whence he came. But as he left, his talon had tangled on the keychain of the guard, and so as he flew back through, he dragged the keys into the cell, and then they clanged onto the floor, and the eagle left. The fox familiar was okay, having now gone back to his own dimension once more until he is summoned, and Andrew picked up the serendipitous keys and unlocked the cell and escaped. Perfect. Andrew raced down the hall, trying to find a way out, or perhaps encounter the Candlemaster so he could slay him, and sure enough, something happened. Wind blew through the hallway. He's like, "Ah!" The wind was strong. What was this power? It reminded him kind of like that woman from before, only not nearly as strong. It was probably just because it was wind or something. He's like, "Ugh!" He peeked around his arms as he was shielding himself from the wind, and he saw a giant fan blowing at him, just blowing wind at him. What kind of weird trap was this, he wondered. Although it was very effective, he couldn't cast his poison on it. Not only would poison not affect a fan, but if he tried, the wind would just blow it back in his face, and that would be bad. So he's just marching forward step by step, and then right as he was at the fan, he kicked it over and it fell, and then started shooting wind up into the ceiling uselessly. Then he jumped, gaining air to clear the fan thanks to its own power, landed, raced up the stairs, barged through the door, and he entered the courtyard surrounded by clay, candle clay, or wax as some people would call it. Just this gushing from the earth, as if the entire courtyard's soil were wax. It's just, and it came down upon Andrew. Andrew shot at it with his crossbow. But you, and then he lunged out from its reach, rolled, and was like, "Hwah, hwah," and he kept running, just kept running, and then up in a tower, he saw a figure duck into hiding right at that moment that he had caught a glimpse. That must be Phil. He raced to that tower, hurried up the stairs, and entered the highest chamber. There he saw a workshop, a wizard's or perhaps an alchemist's workshop, and there was a wizard, a guy just dressed in the most stereotypical wizard attire. "I see you have arrived, Andrew, if that is indeed your name." And then Andrew's like, "Yes, it is." And then Bill was like, "Oh, good. It appears that my intelligence was correct. You know, sometimes spies are kind of dumb." And then Andrew was like, "I wouldn't know. I've never dealt with spies before." "Oh, well, I have. Many a time. I do not leave my castle very often, so I depend on spies to relay information to me about the outside world. For if I leave my wax, I may die." "Why would you die from leaving your wax?" "My magic is because of a pact I made many decades ago. A pact with an owl. The owl of wax." "I have never heard of the owl of wax." "Oh, the owl of wax is a very niche deity. quite unusual, in fact, that it even exists at all. But I met him one time in a forest. I was lost, and he guided me to safety. As thanks, I wished to worship him. So we formed a pact, and he gave me these powers of candle that you see me wielding here. Well, that is some very inconsequential but interesting lore, Andrew said. But you are my enemy. You work for David. That is something I cannot forgive. He wishes to conquer the world by baking bread. So I must defeat you, so you cannot stop me from intervening with his evil scheme. I thought you would say that, but I am prepared for a fight. Come at me and show me your mettle. Who will win, good or evil? Which side shall triumph? And the two battled. Phil launching fireballs at the end of wicks and summoning forth wax to attack. Everything in the castle is made of wax. He hurled books across the room as if using telekinesis, shifted the shapes of the walls to strike with spikes and swords and bludgeoning things. Andrew dodged and weaved, attempting to hurl poison and fire bolts. It was an epic battle that I cannot put into good words, but it was cool. Use your imagination and envision how incredible of a fight this was as two men used every weapon at their disposal to try and defeat the other. It was a back and forth that waged on for several minutes, each man fighting to utter exhaustion until finally Andrew, at a moment of fortune, he dodged and fired his lightning bolt, striking Phil down with a lucky shot at a moment when Phil was most vulnerable, in between casting spells. He fell to the ground. It was like, ugh! You fight well, great hero. Perhaps you can prevent David from conquering the world. Oh, I will, he said, with a strange air of arrogance, most unbecoming of him. But I went like this, so he said it like that. And then Phil died. So it was that the second of David's sergeants was defeated. It was late, however, so Andrew decided to stay at the castle for the night, resting his weary bones and getting himself as prepared as possible for the following day when his journey would continue. He still had a long way to go to reach wherever it was he was going. He needed to find that ghost at the cemetery and to learn of David's whatever I said the ghost would tell him. I had actually completely forgotten that the ghost existed until just moments ago when I was preparing to say that Andrew needed to continue his quest to the Fortress of Shark. But instead, he had to seek out the ghost at the cemetery first, which I'd forgotten about because of all that crazy stuff happening in Phil's castle. Maybe I should write that down. But where should he go? Andrew did not know where he had been taken after being shot by that arrow. He had been given directions to the cemetery from the woman's hut, but now he had no idea which direction to go. He did not know where this castle was in relation to anything. He climbed up the towers and looked about, but could not find much in the way of landmarks. He must have been dragged a very long ways. What was he to do now? He needed guidance, so he asked his fox familiar to survey the land, hoping that he could find any indication of their next destination while he rested for the night. The next morning, Andrew awoke to find his fox familiar had returned. He inquired about what had been discovered. The fox familiar told him that they had been unrealistically carried far off course. However, there was a shortcut. If they could secure passage on a vessel to cross a nearby river, they would be very near the cemetery. It would perhaps be difficult to gain passage at the near port, but it would be significantly quicker than having to go around the water to the nearest bridge. So they charted a course to that town. About half a day's walk from the castle. It was sometime around late afternoon or early evening when they finally arrived at the port. They knew that no ships would likely be setting out at this time. Most of the ships had come in, and a lot of them seemed to be fishing vessels, so he doubted there were any ferries just crossing the strait. He would wait until morning, and then ask if one of the fishermen on their rounds could ferry him across the river. This wasn't ideal, though. He was taking a very long time to reach the Fortress of Shark. David was being given plenty of time to fulfill his goal, considering all he had to do was bake some bread. But given that Andrew had not seen any sign of David spreading his evil across the land in conquest, he assumed that there must be time left, that he hasn't yet finished the bread for whatever reason. This is all making perfect sense.
No, not really, no.
The next morning, Andrew set out to find a fishing vessel. He asked around, and within an hour he found a fisherman who was willing to ferry him across the river, but on one condition. My daughter needs a thing. My daughter has asked for something grand. My daughter's getting married, you see, in about a week, and she has and on her wedding registry, she has asked for something that I've been having difficulty procuring myself. If you can bring me this thing, I will gladly ferry you across the river. Andrew asked the fisherman what was this thing that his daughter desired, and the fisherman said, "My daughter has asked for a witch." My daughter has asked for an enchanted cauldron, the sort of vessel that a witch would use for creating her brews. Where the hell am I gonna get an enchanted cauldron? Andrew inquired, suddenly starting to feel as though it would be much easier to just head to a bridge downriver, or maybe ask a different fisherman instead of pursuing this nonsense. There actually happens to be one at the magic shop in town, the fisherman explained. However, I do not have the coin to purchase it, and the shopkeep has said that he would be willing to give it to somebody who will do a great favor for him. Andrew was like, "Okay, I will go see what this great favor is." He hurried to the magic shop after getting directions to it. He entered and explained his situation, saying that he needed his cauldron quickly. He had a mission to fulfill, a quest to do things. He did not say that it was to save the world, for he did not want people to start panicking over what was going on behind the scenes. He asked, "What is this favor you need done so that I may acquire the witch's cauldron?" The shopkeep was like, "Yes, you see, my dog has gone missing. Could you find it?" Andrew wondered why this was such a difficult task for the fisherman to fulfill, especially for the sake of his daughter's wedding. But Andrew, glad that it was such a simple job that probably wouldn't take too much time, he's like, "Okay, I will find your dog." The shopkeeper explained what his dog looked like, and Andrew set off into town. He sent off his fox familiar so they could look in two different directions at once, and then they split up, surveying for this dog. It took some time, but he found the dog. He raced back to the shop, needing to hurry needing to catch the ride before the fisherman set out for the day. And he's like, "Wah! Here is your dog!" Hurling it across the shop. The man catches it, and then he's like, "Wah!" In turn, hurling the cauldron. And he's like, "Here's your cauldron!" Andrew catches the cauldron, races out like a lunatic, holding it above his head. He gets back to the harbor, and he's like, "Kutshaw! Here's the witch's cauldron!" The man, a little skeptical and reasonably so, needed to test it real quick. There's a little bit of time before he actually needed to get out on the water, when the fish would be biting best. So they decided a little experiment. They would create a potion and see if it actually inherited any properties, if they were actually able to do anything with this cauldron to prove that it was indeed what he desired. They gathered together 3 easy-to-find ingredients. I hope these are easy-to-find ingredients. The moon, the father, and the seed. 3 easy-to-find ingredients. A literal moon rock. They sell those in the square as trinkets. You know, meteorites that just come raining from the sky. Yeah, those are just worthless trash. Just pick them up, sell them for $5. A seed of a plant. It didn't really matter. They just went to the grocery store and bought some sunflower seeds. And the father himself climbed into the cauldron with the rock and the seed. And it was like, "Show us your power, oh great cauldron!" And he was like, "Ka-cha!" A burst of smoke exploded, and in his hands, where the rock and the seed once were, was a potion. He was like, "Wow, that worked." A little unorthodox of a mixture, sure, but it proved that the witch's cauldron was genuine. So they had a deal. The fisherman, when he set out for the day, he started off his route by setting a few traps in the water, and then while he left those to collect fish or whatever, he ferried Andrew across the river. And from there, Andrew set forth to the cemetery. Andrew arrived at the cemetery. He looked around. He knew what he was seeking, but where to find it? How do you find a ghost? He sent forth his fox familiar, who is basically like a spiritual entity of some sort. He sent forth his fox familiar that was proving very valuable on this quest. I'm really glad I gave Andrew more powers than just poison magic, or he wouldn't be doing so hot in any situation. The fox familiar used his ethereal powers to speak to the spirits of the realm, communicating his thoughts to all the graves in the cemetery, seeking out this one ghost who knew David, and it emerged from a grave near a shattered tombstone that looked as if it matched the tombstone fragment that Andrew carried with him. Arose, and the ghost was like, "Hello, are you the hero who wishes to kill David?" And Andrew was like, "Yes." And the ghost granted unto Andrew a boon. As they were ghosts, these two had become friends. They talked all the time in the bars in Afterlife Land, and David had once divulged his greatest weakness to this ghost. In just a moment they were having, David told me of his great weakness. His mother, which you must use against him. Somehow. You see, he had told me, as a child he had been quite the mama's boy, and through that he had developed a bit of a soft spot or a vulnerability, as you will, to nurturing personalities. If you present yourself as such, you may catch him off guard. This was very strange advice, especially since Andrew felt he would just show up and shoot David in the head and then shove the tombstone into him. But perhaps David was very powerful. Despite having that sword to gain advantages, he managed to conquer a realm protected by a god. So maybe this really weird advantage would prove to Andrew's benefit. Andrew thanked the ghost and was on his way. And that is where we are going to leave off for today. Next time, we will continue the epic quest of Andrew. In the meantime, be sure to like, comment, subscribe to make sure you see the next exciting chapter of this journey that has completely gotten away from me, but I'm doing my best to hold it together with whatever nonsense I can. See you next time. That was a very angry way to say goodbye.